Hey guys, I am going to be doing day 15 with you today. I know I'm posting a little bit late, but I know some of you are behind anyway, so. Alright, naturally selected to survive. The Earth has changed over and over again throughout the course of its history. Some of these changes have happened quickly. Others have occurred over long stretches of time. For example, the planet has experienced ice ages that took place over thousands of years. During those eras, huge sheets of ice covered much of the surface of the globe. Then, for a few thousand years between the ice ages, the Earth warmed up. Scientists believe that this cycle has actually occurred a few times. As the planet goes through this cycle, environments may go through changes. In order to survive in changing environments, species oftentimes must undergo a process of adaptation. Adaptation refers to a mutation or genetic change that enables an organism, such as an animal or plant, to survive in its environment. This trait is passed down from one generation to the next, becoming an inherited trait of the species. A species may have to adapt to warmer temperatures, increased precipitation, or even developing air pollution. If the organisms of a species cannot change along with the area in which they live, they risk dying out. Though an uncountable number of species that have roamed the earth have become extinct, the planet has seen many others adapt as well. These select organisms have been able to go on living in their environment. A species adapts to a changing environment as organisms with favorable traits reproduce and survive. These favorable traits, which helps the species survive, are passed down through different generations of the species. This process is called natural selection. Recent history has given us an important example of how organisms are able to survive once their environment changes. I have to stop doing these videos at night. Okay. Light gray peppered moths and dark-colored peppered moths lived in the countryside between the cities of Manchester and London in England. Many years before the 19th century, more of the light gray peppered moths had been able to survive in their environment mostly because of their color. Their thin layer of skin, as well as their large wings, was mostly gray with a little bit of black peppered all over them. This color was advantageous because the light gray peppered moths were camouflaged when they stayed on dark-colored areas of the sides of trees in their habitat. Predators, which were mostly birds, could not see the light-colored moths on the trees because the color of the moths blended in with the color of the trees. Instead, the predators are able to see the dark-colored peppered moths more easily. In the early 19th century, though, England began the first years of its Industrial Revolution. Many areas, especially in and between the cities of Manchester and London, became populated by a growing number of factories. This was because companies began to use a lot of new machinery that had been invented in the decades before. These machines made work a lot easier in many ways. The companies could build more products faster than ever before. However, many of these factories needed coal to provide energy for the machines. When coal burns, it gives off a lot of dark-colored smoke. Soot is a black substance that collects on a surface that comes in contact with smoke. Smoke's dark particles stick into surfaces like paint. In the English countryside near industrialized areas, the trees began to blacken with soot because of all the smoke in the air from the factories. This made the light gray peppered moths much more vulnerable. Predators could see them on the trees more clearly and easily hunt them down. Sometime in the next 100 years, scientists began to notice a huge change in the moth population, living in and between the cities of Manchester and London, near where many of those factories had been constructed. Most of the peppered moths were the dark-colored kind. What caused this change was the fact that predators had eaten a lot of the light gray peppered moths because the moths were clearly visible on the black-colored trees. The dark-colored peppered moths in the area survived much more easily and mated with other dark-colored peppered moths until most of the population of peppered moths became dark-colored. Many scientists feel that this is an example of evolution in the species supports Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection. An author named J.W. Tutt published a report about the moths a few years after Darwin's death, writing that the change in the peppered moth population seemed to support Darwin's ideas. Though Darwin was not alive to read the Tut report, his teachings about nature live on. Life finds a way. All right, so these are paired texts. Sorry. All right, deep, deep under the ocean, there's a place unlike anywhere else on Earth, in a place so deep that it's impossible for sunlight to reach. Great rocky tubes shoot up from the seafloor. These tubes, or chimneys, belch out what looks like black smoke all day and all night. The smoke is in fact a mixture of minerals from deep within the earth, which shoot out of the chimneys at extremely hot temperatures. For many years after these things, which scientists now call hydrothermal vents, were discovered, scientists were sure that nothing could live anywhere near them. They had lots of reasons to think this. For one, there was absolutely no sunlight. In one way or another, sunlight is the source of almost all life on the surface of Earth. Plants use it to make food in the process called photosynthesis. Some animals eat other plants, and other animals eat the plant eaters. Without sunlight, the whole system falls apart. So how could there be any life somewhere that is so deep in the ocean that no light makes it down? Secondly, the minerals in the smoke, mostly sulfur, were thought for a long time to be poisonous to most living things on Earth. With so much sulfur coming out of the ground at such high temperatures for many years, scientists were pretty confident that nothing could live around these vents. After studying them for a long time, however, scientists made a shocking discovery. There was life around the vents. Tiny bacteria used the sulfur from the vents to make food, a process called chemosynthesis. Other animals like worms and shrimp then ate this bacteria. A whole ecosystem exists there. Finding this life made scientists reconsider the power of evolution. They had thought for almost 100 years that while life was adaptable to a certain extent, there were some things it simply couldn't do without, sunlight and oxygen being two. However, as the animals around the hydrothermal vents proved, life was much more adaptable than they had believed. Now scientists think that life, just like it does around the vents, could exist right now on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Europa has long been known to have vast oceans, but scientists thought that being so far from the sun and having an atmosphere so thin it couldn't hold in much air, life could not be possible there. Now it seems like those factors might not matter as much as previously thought. Some scientists also think that Mars may have once had life on its surface. As the undersea vents example shows, life is extremely adaptable. All different kinds of places on Earth have animals and plants that have adapted over many years to thrive in particular places where they live. Some animals that live in places where it is very snowy, like high in the mountains or in the Arctic, end up white so that they fit in better. Animals and plants that live in the desert, like cacti and camels, have evolved so that they need only the very little water that they get living there. Now think of fish. They are able to swim and breathe perfectly in the water. But a fish would not do very well living in the middle of the desert. Similarly, if you took a big black bear from the forest and dropped it down in the middle of the ocean, it would not last long at all. This is because a process called natural selection has been at work since not long after the Earth first formed many billions of years ago. Natural selection allows animals that have traits suited to a particular environment to survive and produce offspring. Animals who are able to adapt to changes in their environment die off. Who are unable to adapt to changes in their environment die off. With this process constantly at work, nature produces all sorts of animals well suited to where they are. Giraffes with long necks to reach the leaves of the trees in Africa, bears that sleep through long winters where there's no food, and so on and on. The process of natural selection helps us to understand how many plants and animals became the way they are. Plants and animals became the way they are. Many times, life finds a way, no matter how harsh the environment. Okay, use the article Life Finds a Way to answer questions 1 through 3. So Life Finds a Way was about the hydrothermal vents. Okay. Number 1, what did the animals around hydrothermal vents prove about life? Okay, so if you go back up here, they thought that animals could not survive around hydrothermal vents for a couple reasons. One being that there is no sun, and two being the extreme heat. So, but what did this prove? If you read here, after studying them for a long time, however, scientists made a shocking discovery. There was life around these vents. Tiny bacteria used the sulfur from the vents to make food, a process called chemosynthesis. Other animals like worms and shrimp then ate this bacteria, a whole ecosystem. Finding this life made scientists reconsider the power of evolution. This is where you will find your answer. Pause to go to number 2. If you haven't already, you're either writing this on a piece of paper, taking a picture, and emailing to your teacher, or you're writing this in a Google Doc that you will share with your teacher. Okay, number 2. The first half of the article discusses the discovery of life around hydrothermal vents. What idea does the second half of the article discuss? So the first half talks about hydrothermal vents, why they can't survive there. So what does this half discuss? And it kind of all starts with what number 1 talks about. Pause to write your answer number 2. Number 3, explain how the discovery of life around hydrothermal vents is connected to the idea in the second half of the article. Use evidence from the text to support your answer. Okay, so let's connect the first half to the second half. Why does that go together? Why did they use this example of hydrothermal vents to make their point in the second half of the article? And use evidence from the text to support your answer. Pause to answer 3. All right, moving on. Use the article naturally selected to survive. So naturally selected to survive is the first article. Number 4, describe the peppered moth. Include at least 2 details from the article in your description. Okay, so describe the peppered moth. So here we talk about the earth has changed. Remember, the first or second sentence of any paragraph is the topic of that paragraph. So you can pretty much figure out what that paragraph is going to be about. As the plant goes through cycle, environments go through changes. A species adapts to changes in the environment. Okay, here we go. Light gray peppered moths and dark gray peppered moths. So this is where you're going to find information describing them. It kind of sets it up. So there you have it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Paragraph 4. All right, pause to answer question 4. Number 5. The first half of this article discusses the ideas of adaptation and natural selection. What specific example of these ideas does the second half of the article discuss? So, what ideas does the gray... Oh, that's kind of the answer. What idea does the article discuss that talks about this idea of adaptation and natural selection? And how does the example prove these 2 things? Pause to answer 5. All right, number 6. How does the example from the article help readers understand the ideas of adaptation and natural selection? So I just kind of asked that in question 5. So how does the example of the peppered moths, black peppered moths, help you understand the idea of adaptation and natural selection? What happened in the environment that supports adaptation or natural selection? Pause to answer 6. All right, use both articles to answer questions 7 and 9. So compare and contrast these 2 articles. Use information from both articles to support your comparison. Okay, so compare. The word compare means to tell how they were alike. So what's some information from these articles that make these 2 alike? I really can't, I don't want to give you the answer, but maybe it's about the examples they used, or what they are both, what the topic of both of them is. Pause to answer 7. Okay, 8, contrast the structure of these two articles. Support your answer with information from both articles. So contrast means the opposite. So how are these two articles different? Use information in the articles to help explain your answer. So they don't give the same example. So what examples did one give and the other one give? All right, and pause to answer 8. And number 9, do the differences in the structure of these two articles make one article easier to understand than the other? Support your answer with evidence. Okay, so this is a great question. This is kind of your own thought. Reading them, and I already have in my head what I think, so I'll be interested to read what you guys think. And one was easier. One was more captivating in my mind off the get-go for me as a reader. But maybe there was something in the structure of the way they wrote these two articles that helped you understand one better or become more interested in one maybe more than the other one. All right, so answer question 9 and submit, either take a picture of your paper and send it to your teacher, or you can make your Google document and share it with your teacher. All right, have a great night, guys.